Hi, I'm Ryan Barba, and today I want to speak to the number one question that I get asked over and over again from candidates who are applying to competitive business schools sometime in the next year or in upcoming years, which is, what is the difference that makes the difference between an accepted candidate and a rejected one? When you have so many candidates applying with decent GMAT scores and GPAs, what separates the accepted candidates from the rejected ones? And what should I be doing before I start my applications to put myself in a position to win? Well, unfortunately, most candidates lose in the MBA admissions game before they even get started. They study for the GMAT, which is important to do, of course, I'm not knocking it, but then they hop right into application mode and fail to really think through what I'd call their differentiation strategy. They don't think about their unique, one-of-a-kind opportunities to win the game, to distinguish themselves from other highly qualified applicants, either because they haven't even thought about doing it, or they don't know how. And for most, I think it's both. Most applicants haven't even thought about thinking through their own strategy for how they're going to beat out the competition. And if they have, they really have no idea what it takes to really stand apart, or even if they're thinking through the right kind of ideas. But that process, the process of creating your differentiation strategy, or what I would call your UVP, your unique value proposition, which is a standard marketing term, is crucially important to do before you even think about starting to craft your application essays. A GMAT score and a solid GPA and good work experience are a dime a dozen in the competition for admission to a top business school. Those things simply aren't going to differentiate you because literally thousands of applicants have those things. You need to think about this process as kind of a human process, as I'd call it. At the end of the day, the person reading your application, the admissions officer, is just that, a person. People, by their very nature, like to be convinced. They like to be entertained. They like to be inspired. You got to catch their attention if you want their attention. And what happens if the person reading your application wakes up in a crappy mood, or gets a flat tire in the pouring rain on their way into the office that day, or their puppy died, or their wife left them that morning? How are you going to make your case to that admissions officer who walks into the office with real life problems, like we all have from time to time, ready to crap all over every application he or she reads that day? And what if your application falls at the bottom of a stack of 40 applications, and the admissions officer is reading yours at 4:50 in the afternoon at the end of her day, exhausted and just wanting to go home? You got to move your reader. You got to move your audience. And it's not just about entertaining your reader. You need to find your way to stand apart, to be really impressive, to make a case for yourself that even the most discerning and selective admissions committees can't ignore and won't forget. Standing out in the admissions process, at its core, is a marketing exercise. Yet most candidates have no idea how to market themselves and differentiate themselves from the competition, other highly qualified applicants. So today, I want to walk you through what those truly remarkable candidates articulate clearly and convincingly to get themselves into a good business school. This is best practice stuff. I want to help you start thinking through your own strategy, your own unique value proposition, which again, you must articulate if you want to win over the admissions committee, beat out the competition, and earn an acceptance letter to a competitive MBA program. But before I get into that, let me tell you a little bit about me and my background, real quick, because I know it's kind of annoying, but just so you're not watching this video all the while asking, well, who is this guy and who is he to tell me about what it takes to get into business school? Well, to start, I'll tell you this. If you're an aspiring MBA candidate, I was you 10 years ago. If you have a dream of going to a top-tier business school, trust me, I get it. I had those same dreams not so long ago, and getting my MBA from a top competitive program completely changed the trajectory of my career, my earning potential, and frankly, my life. Back when I applied to business school, I was accepted to 5 top 15 programs and ultimately decided to go to Cornell when they offered me a full tuition scholarship. And I say that humbly because I'm so thankful for that, and honestly, I'm not quite sure I deserved it, but I went from an entry-level sales support role for a small healthcare IT company making less than $40,000 a year to earning a job as a senior strategy consultant for a top 4 consulting firm earning upwards of $120,000. And that was just in my first year out of business school. Before going to business school, I lived in a beat-up house with 4 other roommates, barely affording my $500 rent, to just a couple years out of business school buying a luxury condo in the Boston Seaport district. But for me, it was not just about the money and the title I got, although those things don't suck, but the connections I built, the leadership skills I developed, the training I got, not only in formal business concepts, but also in general life skills. I mean, spending 2 years learning from brilliant people is just life-changing for most people. It certainly was for me. So if you have the dream and hunger to go big and get an MBA from a highly respected program, I salute you, I congratulate you, and I understand your hunger. And I want to help you achieve your goals, which is why I'm here today, and that's why I do what I do as an MBA admissions advisor. So I'm one of those overzealous, crazy people who tends to take on too much at once all the time. And if I'm honest, I'd say I'm working on it, but I'm not. It's just who I am. And so after I graduated from business school, I actually had 2 jobs. I became a strategy consultant, as I mentioned, but I also worked as a paid member of the MBA admissions staff at Cornell, and then 3 years later at Keenan Flagler at the University of North Carolina. So on a daily basis, I was reviewing candidate applications and conducting interviews off campus via Skype and occasionally on campus too. In fact, in my 5 years working in MBA admissions, I reviewed over 6,000 applications and conducted over 1,200 interviews. That's 7,200 applications that I reviewed in one form or another. And since these programs are quite selective, and they're not even the most selective programs, as you probably know, but because they were quite selective, I personally rejected over 6,000 candidates from business school. But I accepted almost 1,200 too, so I'm not a complete jerk. But this experience, and frankly, the experience of reviewing so many applications that missed the mark, gave me a pretty unique perspective. I know what an application needs to do and look like to win in the admissions process for a competitive program. I can very quickly recognize whether an application will get a strong look from a competitive business school or not. And I have a great understanding of what most candidates get wrong, the common mistakes they make. I've been that gatekeeper, you know? So after I left my job as an admissions officer at Keenan Flagler, and yes, I was still working as a marketing strategy consultant by the time, I started coaching applicants on their MBA applications. And it turned out I was good at it. In my first year, I was getting people into HBS, Stanford, Booth, Sloan, Kellogg, all the top programs. And man, getting that phone call from candidates minutes after they received the call from their top choice program who told them that they had earned acceptance, for the first time in my life, I felt like I was really making a true difference in people's lives. I mean, I really liked it. And I think it's kind of a weird thing to like, by the way. Not everyone would enjoy reviewing and re-reviewing the same essay and resume 6 times over, but whatever, I did. And I got to know some really interesting people from all over the world along the way. In fact, since I've been doing MBA admissions advising or consulting for about 5 years now, I've worked with candidates from over 40 different countries, more than 550 candidates total. And if I can brag a little bit, if that's allowed, more than 94% of my candidates got accepted into at least one top tier, like top 15 MBA program. Okay? So I'm assuming that's enough about me, and I do want to get into some actual content here. You're not here to learn about the Ryan Barba story, I'm sure. You're here to learn something that'll get you into a top business school. I hope. If not, you're in the wrong place. And if you are just here to learn about me, that's a little weird. So, in an effort to make this as broadly relevant as possible, meaning to share content that will be relevant and important for you to hear, regardless of your background or what schools you plan to apply to, if you even know that yet, I want to share with you what I think the biggest mistake that MBA candidates make when it comes to applying to business school, which I mentioned before, failure to identify what I call their UVP, their unique value proposition. This, again, is a marketing concept, a marketing term, and it's basically your go-to message and positioning for how you'll distinguish yourself from the competition, all the other applicants. In marketing, a company will try to articulate their UVP, their unique value proposition, to customers, basically arguing for why they should choose their brand over the competition. In MBA admissions, you're really doing the same exact thing. You need to convince the admissions committee that you have unique value to offer, that there are clear and distinct ways in which you're different from the thousands of other applicants applying to that program. See, but the thing about a unique value proposition is that it must be unique. If you want to separate yourself from the pack, give the admissions committee a reason to accept and root for you. If you think that your GMAT score, GPA, and fancy brands in your resume is going to do the trick, and that you can just phone it in the admissions process because, quote, my candidacy speaks for itself, unquote, you'll become one of the thousands and thousands of candidates who leave the admissions process every year scratching their heads, asking what went wrong. And trust me, that's a really sucky place to end up, especially after putting in all those hours studying for the GMAT and writing those essays and coaching your recommenders and filling out those tedious applications forms, so on and so forth. But year after year, as an MBA admissions consultant and advisor, candidates hire me to help them on their applications, often 2 or 3 months before the admissions deadlines for their favorite schools. And the first thing I ask them is, okay, so tell me why in the world Harvard or whatever school they're applying to should accept you. And most of them will say the same thing. Well, I have a decent GMAT score, I have a solid college GPA from a good school, I have the required number of years of work experience, etc. Now, think about that for a second. When I ask a candidate why they deserve to get into a top-tier MBA program, why they're special, the first thing they tell me is their GMAT score. I'll tell you this right now. A solid GMAT score is table stakes. The vast majority of people who apply to a top program have a great GMAT score, upwards of 80% of them. And every year, people with crappy GMAT scores get into the great programs too. So if you think your little GMAT score or GPA is going to differentiate you in any way, you're out to lunch. You're dreaming. I mean, this past year, HBS accepted approximately 11% of its applicants. Stanford, less than 7%. And given what I know about these programs, and I know them very well, I'd estimate that more than 80% of the candidates who were rejected from these programs met the admission standards for those programs. They had adequate GMAT scores and GPAs. And at the same time, this past year, I personally advised 15 candidates applying to Harvard Business School. 14 of them got in. A few of them had sub 700 GMAT scores. One of them had a GPA under 3.0. But what got them in is that they had a strategy. I forced them to. They went into the admissions process knowing exactly how they were going to market themselves and separate themselves from the pack of other applicants. They knew exactly what their UVP, their unique value proposition, was. So, the obvious question: how do you create a unique value proposition? And what does an effective unique value proposition, or UVP, look like? What is that difference that makes the difference? The thing that successful candidates showcase in their applications that the unsuccessful ones don't. In general, a top MBA program absolutely has to see 5 things from a successful applicant in addition to an in-range GMAT score and GPA. And for those of you listening to this on your phone, maybe in your car, and not watching this video and can't take notes, and even for those of you who are watching this video and don't want to take notes, which I'm assuming is just about everybody else, not to worry, I'll get you the content in an email. So, here are the 5 things that I believe make a unique value proposition. The 5 things, again, in addition to a good GMAT and GPA, that you really have to show the admissions committee if you expect them to pay attention to you. First is your vision. A specific, uniquely you, clear story for where you're headed and how you'll add value to the world, to the business world, both directly after business school and long term. And a clear case for how an MBA will help you achieve those goals. This assures the outcome that you've really given thought to why you need an MBA, but more importantly, that you not only know where you're going, but that you have goals of adding value and contributing in some way through your career. In other words, that you're not just trying to go to business school to get rich. If you don't know your vision, stay tuned. We're going to talk to that. Second is achievement and relevant progress. Evidence of your ability to succeed in a challenging environment and of your growth in areas that are relevant to your post-MBA goals. Showing that you've demonstrated an ability to achieve at a high level will help convince the admissions committee that you're likely to succeed during and after business school, that you'll be able to hack it in a challenging classroom environment and in a competitive post-MBA job position. Showing relevant progress, that is, the development of skills and knowledge that will serve you well post-business school, given your vision, your stated career goals, shows focus, clarity, and a deliberate action to prepare yourself to succeed. And don't worry if you're going to business school to switch careers. You can still make a compelling case here if you get creative. I've done it with many, many candidates many times in the past. Third thing you got to show, probably not a surprise if you've looked into the top business schools at all, is leadership potential. Proof that you can lead regardless of your formal leadership or management responsibilities. MBA admissions committees look for very specific things in detecting whether a particular candidate is likely to be a successful leader in their career. Frankly, you need to play to that and provide specific examples that showcase relevant leadership skills. Fourth is what I call your unique kicker. A single characteristic, experience from your background, or attribute about you that makes you really memorable, interesting, and likable. This speaks directly to my prior point, the need for you to stand apart, because frankly, there are probably hundreds, if not thousands, of applicants applying to business school that year that have very similar backgrounds and experiences as you do. But communicating a legitimate, unique kicker, as I call it, in your essays and in your application, will separate you from the pack. Most candidates are too formal in their applications, and they fail to even think about, never mind describe, those unique things and characteristics about themselves that would actually really help their chances to win in this process. And then finally, is your expertise. MBA classroom relevant knowledge that will enable you to further classroom and small group discussions and support the knowledge and skill growth of fellow students. The way I like to think about this and explain this is actually to put yourself in the perspective of a business school professor. If you're teaching a class and you're looking to strategically group students to ensure there is a balance of different skills in each group, what is it that you bring to the table? How are you going to help your small group, or really the classroom discussion in general? Are you the candidate who can create that sophisticated, really whiz-bang Excel dashboard? The candidate who's worked in 5 different Asia-Pacific countries and understands international business? Are you the woman who's worked in various areas of healthcare and can speak to important trends in the industry? The guy who's worked in tech and can help bring entrepreneurial ideas to life? Most candidates underestimate just how much valuable knowledge and expertise they have to give, opting instead to assume that they're nothing special. And that's a shame. You got to recognize and articulate what it is that you uniquely bring to the table. And if you know how to think about and identify that unique knowledge and expertise, you'll have a huge advantage in the MBA admissions process. So I call my UVP my value model, because as you can see, it really worked out well for me that the 5 different elements actually spell out the word value. So it's a little easy way to remember it. And again, you'll get this in your email, so you'll have all of this at your fingertips. But obviously, these 5 things, This is a lot to try to prove. But if you look at just about every MBA application, there are opportunities to display all of these things in your application form, in your essays, and maybe on your resume. And if you're able to articulate and prove each of these things convincingly, that you have unique value-add vision to do something real and meaningful in your career, that you've been an all-star in your pre-MBA career and have proven an ability to succeed in challenging environments and make a real impact on the job, that you're moving forward and making progress in pursuit of your real post-MBA goals, that you have proven leadership potential and are thus destined to be a competent leader of people later in your career, that you have relevant expertise that will elevate the discussions and the experiences of your peers just by your being present in the class, and that you're truly unique and likable in unique and exciting ways. No MBA admissions committee on earth will turn away a candidate who meets their basic admissions criteria, like their GMAT and GPA, and can compellingly articulate these 5 things. But because these things are difficult to prove, very candidates do so convincingly. So there's room at the top here. The few that do get into top business schools. And the fewer that do so exceptionally well, those are the ones who get scholarship offers. So, having a well-defined, well-communicated UVP, unique value proposition, is crucial. And at its core, what I'm advocating for here is kind of like a business strategy, right? I mean, think about it. No company on earth would go out and try to market to its customers without knowing exactly what their marketing pitch is and what their customers want. They need to articulate the benefits they're promising and their argument for why their product or their service is a better choice than what the competition is offering. They never just wing it and just throw out some random advertisements without considering what their target customers are really looking for and hope for the best. They'd have a strategy going in. Most candidates don't do that, at least not nearly enough. They don't look at this as a strategic marketing exercise. They have a general sense of their weaknesses maybe, like, well, my GMAT score is a little low, so I'll address that in the optional essay, but then they just kind of answer the essay questions on the fly without getting clear on what they have to communicate beforehand and in advance. And I mean, think about the value of having a well-defined UVP when, for example, guiding your recommenders, right? Most candidates do very little coaching of their recommenders. They pick their recommenders, send them the link to complete their recommendation essays online, and say, okay, make sure you say nice things about me, make me look pretty, right? But if you have a clear sense of what you're trying to show the admissions committee, your brand, your UVP, you can provide that very specific guidance to your recommenders. And the types of things you want them to be stressing will then be stressed in their recommendations. This type of guidance will help your recommenders be more specific and add more credibility to your central message, your UVP. Recommendations, by the way, just an added tip, are in my opinion the least important part of your application. In my experience, a recommendation can break you, but it's unlikely to make you. And what I mean by that is, so when I was working in MBA admissions, the recommendation is the last thing that I would read, right? I had already been through the complete application form, I'd read the resume, I'd read all the essays, and everything else in between. So by the time I got to the point of reading the recommendations, I already had a pretty clear understanding or hypothesis as to whether or not I would be accepting or rejecting an applicant. The recommendations, I would just try to kind of make sure that they were reinforcing the same type of message and not undermining the candidate's credibility, right? So if the candidate goes on and on and on about how great they are and excel in doing these whiz-bang financial dashboards and great working with numbers, amongst other things, and then the recommender steps up and they're asked about the candidate's weaknesses, and they say, well, he's really good at teamwork, but I don't think he's really good working in Excel and he could really work on his data analysis skills. All of a sudden, the recommender has kind of undermined the candidate's message, right? So in that case, the recommendation can kind of break you. But again, the opposite is rarely true, if ever true. I don't think I ever got my way through the entire rest of the application thinking I wasn't going to interview a candidate and then read a recommendation that was so glowing that it convinced me to do otherwise. So a recommendation, again, can pull you from the side of, I think I'll interview him or her, to, oh, maybe I won't, but it's very unlikely that a recommendation will go the other way and bring you from that, I'm not so sure about this candidate, to, maybe I'll give him a chance. Just doesn't happen. So for your recommendations, you just want to make sure that they're on brand. You want to make sure that they're reinforcing the same ideas that you are in your essays and the rest of the application form. Now, you might be thinking, dude, is this really what it takes? Isn't MBA admissions really just about a GMAT score? And, all right, let's start that over because you fell behind. It's okay. Okay, that's good. Ready? Now you might be thinking, dude, is this really what it takes? This whole value model. Isn't admissions really just about a GMAT score? And yeah, I know. By the way, I just called myself dude. I'm cool like that. And I'm basically the king of dad jokes, even though I'm not even a dad, by the way. So be ready for that as you continue through those videos, and I apologize ahead of time. But let me share with you the backgrounds and results of some past candidates I've worked with, some of whom did not have a perfect GMAT score, and some of whom had a great candidacy, who didn't get in initially and didn't get in until they articulated and formulated their own brand, their unique value proposition. So I'll pause there because I'm going to share my screen at that point. Okay, so scroll down. That's another next part of the outline. Probably should have just taken those out. So I want to go further with you in the next video of our training. I've outlined the 5 things you need to do to show an MBA program outside of just good test scores and a decent college GPA, to really differentiate yourself and separate yourself from the pack of other competitive applicants. But how do you actually do that? Well, let's start with the first one, the vision. How do you actually show vision? What is it that an MBA program really wants to hear and see from you so that you appear credible, thoughtful, believable, and exciting when describing your career goals and your need for an MBA? How do you do those things? How do you show an MBA program that you have vision, leadership, all the things I've listed above? So stay tuned, because in the next video, I'm going to walk you through the exact structure to use in your essays and in your interview responses when an MBA program asks you about your vision, the first part of the value framework. It's a question that literally every MBA program is going to ask you about, either in your essays or your interview, and usually both. And that is, what are your career goals? And why do you want an MBA? Hit a home run on that question, which isn't hard to do, and you're off to the races. Your chances of success is really high. But crafting a story or a vision that stands apart is really tough, because a typical admissions officer will hear about 50 candidate stories or visions a day. So we'll cover that. But before you go, I'd like to hear what you thought of this video. Let me know if this was helpful, what you learned, what you hope to learn in the next part, anything. I'd really love to hear from you.